Hello everyone, 5 Minute here. Hope y'all are having a wonderful day so far. Welcome back to another retrospective slash review video. For those of you that are unfamiliar with this type of video, this is where I talk about a Halloween Horror Nights event from the past. So far, I covered 2014, my first year attending, 2016, which is my personal favorite year, and 2021, my personal least favorite. And I really wanted to make another one of these videos, but I just didn't know which past HHN year to cover next. So I asked you guys. I made a poll both here on YouTube and on my Instagram, which, by the way, if you're not following me there already, you should. And an overwhelming majority of you guys voted for 2019. And you know what? I'm kind of glad this one won. Because if I were to do a ranking of all the years I've attended Horror Nights, 2019 would probably be top 3 for me. In fact, I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but I think 2019 was the last great year for Halloween Horror Nights. Why is that, you may ask? Well, that's exactly what I'll be talking about in this video. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. So first, let's talk about the actual lineup. What mazes and scare zones were at the event in 2019? Well, let me just say, this lineup alone is part of the reason why I love this year so much. For returning for the second year in a row was Stranger Things, this time being based on seasons 2 and 3 of the show. Also returning for the second year in a row was Universal Monsters, subtitled Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. A lot of the new exciting IPs featured were Killer Clowns from Outer Space, Ghostbusters, Creepshow, House of a Thousand Corpses, and Jordan Peele's Us. Yeah, that's a pretty stacked lineup of IPs. In 2018, Holidays in Hell was a scare zone that was very well received from fans, so they brought it back as a maze. Another original maze featured was the Curse of Pandora's Box. There was also the old Walking Dead attraction that was still around back then. So if y'all are doing the math, that makes 10 mazes in this lineup, which was the most that Horror Nights in Hollywood has ever had. And there was a reason for that. It was because there was no terror tram that year. I'm not sure why that was. The scare zones featured this year were Fallen Angels, which is the entrance zone, Spirits and Demons of the East, which is in the New York Street where the fire towers were, Christmas in Hell, which is kind of an official ending to Holidays in Hell, the beloved Toxic Tunnel, back where the old tunnel used to be when you would make your way to the backlot, and All Hallows Evil, the scare zone that's actually in the backlot. And speaking of the backlot, 2019 also marks the last year that the Metro sets were incorporated into HHN. And last but certainly not least was the fan favorite show that every HHN fan loved, the Jabberwockies. But yeah, on paper, the lineup already sounded amazing. But how were the actual experiences like? Well, let's talk about that next. I purchased the Frequent Fear Pass, which allows you to go to the event multiple times throughout the run. I attended what was called Fan Preview Night, which took place a day before the actual opening. I went with a couple of old friends, and of course we were all excited to do everything. We all went to early entry, back when it was free. Before the dark times. Anyway, we went straight down to the lower lot to experience our first maze. Stranger Things. I remember the first Stranger Things house having mixed reviews from fans, but I personally really enjoyed it. As a fan of the show, it was cool to see all the scenes play out in live action. I walked into this one being pretty excited for it, and I want y'all to hear me loud and clear when I say this. Not only did this version of Stranger Things not meet my expectations, but I was genuinely dumbfounded at just how horrid this experience was. So to give y'all an idea of just how bad this maze was, I'm gonna go through it like in full detail, scene by scene. First thing you encounter is Will Byers puking out a slug, then you explore the rest of his house. There were no real scares in this entire section. I'm not exaggerating or being hyperbolic, there were literally 0 scares in like the first 3 rooms. I guess they wanted guests to appreciate the visuals, but the visuals weren't even all that exciting. Next up, we have a scene that contained an animatronic that looked hilariously awful. It was supposed to be the Mind Flayer, but it looked like a 7-foot octopus made entirely out of cotton balls. I was kind of in disbelief when I first saw it. Then, we entered the pumpkin patch, where we finally get our first trigger scare. Yeah, almost halfway through is where we get our first real scare. We then go down the tunnels where we see Joyce behind plexiglass and Hopper on the floor covered in rubbery looking vines. Yeah, very exciting scare actor interactions. After that, we spent a good while in these tunnels. We got another scare from a regular guy in a hazmat suit, and there was like this long hallway filled with weird looking blobs that squirt water, and there was like a lot of water too, so it was kind of annoying. Then we finally see the demo dogs, but really wasn't all that excited to see them because it was too little too late. We then go to the Hawkins lab and see a bunch of scientists losing their marbles and more demo dogs. We see another major character yet again on the floor, Bob, getting eaten by the demo dogs. And finally, we see a scene from season 3. Yes, you heard that correctly. The maze that was heavily advertised as showcasing the best of seasons 2 and 3 only had one scene from season 3. But what scene was it? The Starcourt Mall? The secret Russian lab? The Mind Flayer's lair? Nope, it was Hopper's cabin, and all we saw were the Mind Flayer's limbs. Not the actual Mind Flayer, just its limbs. And then that's the end. Now look, I don't want to bash the crew that made this house. Nobody ever goes out of their way to purposely make a bad product. But I don't know what went wrong here. Horror Nights does have tendencies where they give certain mazes more love and attention than others, but Stranger Things is the last maze that deserves that short end of the stick, especially since it was their biggest headliner that year that was based on a Netflix property. But because there were little to no scares, poorly made special effects, and a lack of the most exciting scenes from the show, Stranger Things ended up being a massive dud in 2019. So after that disappointment, we then headed to the backlot, and I just want to take a little bit of time to reminisce about the backlot era of HHN. From when I first started going to Horror Nights to 2019, there were always 3 mazes and a scare zone located in the metro sets, along with a food truck and a bunch of little carnival games. I think it's safe to say that the biggest appeal was the fact that you got to experience more HHN goodness where movies were actually made. That alone was what made HHN so unique from all the other haunts in SoCal. I wonder why they stopped utilizing the metro sets. It can't be just because of, film and TV productions, because it seemed like they had no issue lining everything up in their schedules in the past. Maybe it was just too expensive or too much of a hassle to manage everything in the backlot. Who knows? But anyway, sorry for that little tangent. On to the next maze. Down here were Ghostbusters, Universal Monsters, and Creepshow. Let's talk about Ghostbusters first. Right off the bat, the facade is genuinely one of the best ever made here in Hollywood. The special effects here, a million times better than Stranger Things. There was a lot of cool blacklight stuff, a lot of cool Pepper's ghost effects, impressive puppetry, and giant set pieces galore. The characters and environments looked exactly like how they did in the movie. All the actual Ghostbusters were actually pretty well cast. Almost everything about this maze was amazing. The only issue I have with it is that there were a few too many black walls. They had all these really cool and awesome scenes, but it felt like they didn't know how to transition from one scene to the next, which can kind of like ruin the pacing of a maze. But other than that, like Ghostbusters was so much fun, because unlike Stranger Things, you could just tell the creative team had so much fun making it. Then we have Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. The first Universal Monsters maze was so good, it automatically shot up to my top 5 favorite mazes of all time. So of course I was very excited for this one. And unlike Stranger Things, this maze did not disappoint me. It was a solid continuation of the previous iteration, and it was surprisingly more intense than last year. There were a bunch of monsters in 2018, and this time around there were only 2, but I actually don't see that as an issue, because it makes for a nice contained story and an overall more personal experience. It also made for a completely different experience with brand new set pieces, which I really like. The only complaint I have about this one is that Slash I think only made like 2 new pieces of music for the soundtrack, and the rest of it was just reused from the first Monsters House, and the new music itself was just okay. After experiencing Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, I thought to myself that if Universal keeps bringing back their classic monsters to HHN, I wouldn't complain at all, as long as they were up to par with these first 2. After that, we hit up our final maze in the backlot, which was Creepshow. The original Creepshow was one of those movies that I grew up watching that started my love for horror, so of course I was pretty hyped for this one. The maze was not only based on the movie, but also the TV show on Shudder, which, to be honest, I'm not, not really a fan of. But how was the maze? It was really good. As a fan, I was satisfied. The facade was simple, but effective, and perfectly represented what kind of experience Creepshow was. The Father's Day section was cool, although I think the scene where he comes out of his grave would have been awesome to see pulled off with like an actual scare actor, instead of a cheap looking spirit Halloween decoration. The crate was also really cool. They did a great job bringing Fluffy to life. The section with the roaches was nice. I like how there was like a blackout room where you actually felt bugs crawling all over you. The last two segments were based on the two episodes of the show, and I guess it was pretty neat. The creatures and set pieces looked pretty freaky. I did notice that they decided to utilize music from the show and not the movie, which was kind of a letdown for me, but that's just personal preference. Overall, Creepshow was a solid maze. I'm surprised we never got to see a return for a sequel house. Located next to the Mummy ride was Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I remember the first time I experienced it, I waited 2 hours for it. I think that was one of the longest times I waited for a Horror Nights maze. I kept thinking to myself like that I'm gonna be very upset if this turns out to be a letdown like Stranger Things. Well, thank goodness it was worth the wait. Killer Clowns is one of my all-time favorite horror movies, and I thought the maze did it so much justice. Everything, and I mean everything, was translated perfectly. The facade with Farmer Gene looking for Pooh Bear, the look of the clowns, the way the sets looked, the music, the scenes they decided to include, and just the overall vibe was absolutely perfect. Not too goofy, but not too scary either. I couldn't have asked John Murdy and his crew to make a better version of Killer Clowns. Too bad they never brought this back. Oh well. Now we make our way to the upper lot. Before the Purge Dangerous Waters show was a thing, they used the queue for Waterworld as a maze location, and located in this spot in 2019 was House of a Thousand Corpses. Fun fact, before Rob Zombie made the film that this maze was based on, it was actually a haunted house at Horror Nights. This was before even John Murdy was part of the event. I believe it was titled like American Nightmare, something along those lines. So that's like a cool little instance where a movie is actually based on a maze, which is awesome. But onto the actual maze in 2019. It was decent. I wasn't completely wowed like I was with like say the backlot houses, but it wasn't a complete dumpster fire like Stranger Things. It was cool seeing all the characters from the movie, and I really appreciated the sound design. Hearing the music and the snippets of dialogue from the film was pretty neat. Yeah, there's not really much to complain about here. No major flaws found in this house, but I guess I prefer every other house besides Stranger Things because I am a bigger fan of those IPs, but House of a Thousand Corpses was overall still extremely solid. Also located on the upper lot, more specifically the Parisian Courtyard, was Holidays in Hell. Now like I said, this is a scare zone back in 2018, and I honestly really did enjoy it. If you're new to my channel, I always say in a lot of my Horror Nights videos that I'm not the biggest fan of HHN Hollywood scare zones, but Holidays in Hell was like one of those exceptions because I think they really went all out with the set design and with the concept. It was really cool and very enjoyable. So I was looking forward to the maze in 2019. And I think this maze is a good example of an attraction that I like, but I wanted to love. I so desperately wanted to love it because like the whole maze overall was like, it feels like my kind of thing, you know? It's a very cool, unique experience that kind of has like a dark, twisted sense of humor to it. All the individual scenes were really cool, and I liked how like I like the little transitions of like each holiday. It kind of has like a little like retro postcard kind of thing going on. I liked the looks of all the different characters, but I think my number one favorite thing about this house in particular was how much variety there was. They covered a bunch of different holidays, and again, this is located in Parisian Courtyard, but they managed to pack so much in such little space. I was really impressed with it. So yeah, I thought Holidays was very enjoyable. But how come I only liked it and not loved it? Well, it's because of one thing and one thing only. It might be inoffensive to like a lot of HHN fans, but for me, like it's like that one thing holding me back from having this maze be an all-timer for me, and that's the good old dubstep that we all come to know and love for Horror Nights. I feel like, honestly for me, I feel like dubstep could work in like a random scare zone, but for a maze like Holidays, I feel like it's just so out of place. It kind of felt like John Murdy was worried that like audiences weren't gonna enjoy this one as much because it was an original concept. So he was just like, you know what? Let me collab with my good old friend Figure and bring like this like rave fanatic edge to this maze. And I thought like, no, that's like the last thing Holidays needed. But other than that, Holidays is okay. It's pretty decent. I enjoyed it. And I did kind of enjoy it when they brought it back, even though it was a direct repeat. Now, I actually wasn't able to experience Us or Pandora's Box for my first night. Not because lines were long, but because I had to not come home that late that night. So I came back the following Sunday, I believe. This time I was with my mom. The first thing we did were the mazes I missed my first night. So in order to experience Us and Pandora's Box, you entered through the studio tour entrance. You walked down and the maze tents were actually located right next to the garage for the trams. I guess it really goes to show how expensive it is to make and manage the Terror Tram if it apparently has the same budget as two whole houses. But anyways, let's talk about these actual houses. Let's start with Us. For some weird reason that I genuinely cannot remember, this was my least anticipated of 2019, and because of that, this ended up being my biggest surprise in 2019. I did watch the movie beforehand, and I was wondering just how much of it was going to get covered in the maze, and it covered quite a lot actually. The facade was simple, yet totally set the mood for the rest of the house. The sets look just like how they did in the movie, and again, the sound design here is incredible, but the true star of Us was the cast of tethered scare actors. Fun fact, this cast got the incredible opportunity to work with the actual choreographer for the movie, just so they can act exactly how they were in the movie. That to me is so awesome, and I believe Jordan Peele himself was involved with the making of this house, and you could just feel his involvement all over it. Us overall was a terrific house. And finally, we have The Curse of Pandora's Box. Now, around team member preview of that year, I heard a lot of mixed reviews from this maze. Some people said it was cool, others said it was a contender for worst maze of all time. So I immediately had to check it out for myself. So first we walked in and the first room looked pretty neat. I noticed a couple of reused props here and there, but then suddenly we got stopped by a mysterious guy in a black cloak. Keep in mind, we were the first in line in a little conga line of people. We suddenly see an actual box slowly open up as scary music intensifies. It fully opens and we see nothing but pitch black darkness and red fog. We were then given the green light to enter. I was thinking to myself, holy, what am I in for? The entire maze was relentless with the scares. They did this cool scary trick where all the lighting would just go out for like 1 second. And it was scary because there would be times where an actor would like charge at you as soon as the lights went back up. I also like how they managed to make the house dark while somehow being colorful at the same time. It reminded me of the 3D mazes from back in the day. After my first run through, I was pretty scared. But it was mostly because I didn't know what to expect, and I also wondered if it would hold up throughout the event's run. Oh, it did alright. After every run through, I always walked out like being super scared. I never had a dull experience with this one. Is Pandora's Box the best maze ever? No. The story is pretty bare bones, and some of the costumes looked a little spirit Halloweenish, but this was definitely, hands down, one of the scariest experiences I've ever had at HHN. So now that I talked about all the houses, you're probably wondering how I would rank them. Well, I think it certainly looks something like this. So my number 10, it's like a clear answer, like it's Stranger Things. Yes, I put it below Walking Dead Attraction, that's how bad it is, but thankfully Stranger Things is like the only maze from 2019 that I genuinely disliked. All the other ones from my number 9 to my number 1, I enjoyed at some capacity. I got a lot out of each one of these mazes. Both originals I really did enjoy, but each one had like one or two things that's like preventing me from like really enjoying them. As far as the IPs, pretty much all of them except for Stranger Things, of course, were all translated beautifully, and I had so much fun with a lot of them. And I think like my top 3 in this list are probably like some of my favorites of all time. Now we're quite not done yet with this video. We still have the scare zones to talk about. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I'm not a big fan of Hollywood scare zones, but I wasn't always this jaded towards the scare zones. I actually used to really enjoy them back when they were actually good. Oh gosh, that the way I worded that sounds really mean, but I mean, I don't know how else to put it. You know, I don't want to sound like a geezer, but like back when I first started going to HHN, the scare zones were like super decked out. But I guess like over time, like when they started adding more mazes into the lineup, I guess they had to sacrifice like their attention to the scare zones. At least that's what it feels like to me. I will say this, the scare zones in 2019 weren't that bad. The scare zones haven't reached like bottom tier like yet at this point. But yeah, what scare zones do we have? We have the Fallen Angels one, which I will say the chainsaw performers in that scare zone are really cool. They have like this really cool like rhinestone thing going on with their skull faces, which I thought was pretty. Then we have Spirits and Demons of the East, which is basically just consists of monsters and creatures that like come from like Asian folklore, which I honestly thought was like a really cool idea. I'm surprised they haven't explored this theme again in like any future Horror Nights. And then we have Christmas in Hell, which again is an extension to Holidays in Hell and the Friends Tree. This is always really cool. Nowhere near the level of like Dark Christmas from a couple years back, earlier than this, but yeah, it's still pretty cool. It has a lot of cool decorations. A lot of the looks of the characters are really cool as well. Then we have the one and only Toxic Tunnel. Oh man, you newer HHN vets, like, y'all just don't know. So I'm not gonna lie, when this zone first appeared in like 2017, I believe, I straight up hated it because I thought it was just like a nothing burger of a zone. It was just like a generic tunnel with like the typical flashing lights and dubsteps, and like the characters didn't look all that cool to me. It was just people in like construction uniforms, and like they would wear the masks that you would see like in the vendors of Midsummer Scream or something. But over time, I learned to be more grateful because a weird scare zone in a tunnel is better than no scare zone in a tunnel. And I believe in 2019 they changed up the music to be more rockabilly themed, which was really cool, and they even changed up like the look of the characters, and it was an improvement. And finally, we have All Hallows Evil. Now, during the backlot era of HHN, there would always be a scare zone on the backlot, obviously, like near the metro sets. But what was cool about this scare zone in particular is that, like, every year, it always felt like kind of like a mini outdoor maze in a way. You can't just chill around or like walk back and forth or like sit and chill like a normal scare zone. No, with this scare zone, like you always have to walk like through one way and one way only. And the theme for this zone was basically like old-timey like All Hallows Eve, like Sam Hain kind of era of like Halloween and stuff, which is really cool and made for like an interesting theme, and it really made for some like cool looking characters and environments and decorations. Yeah, and just by you guys just watching this background footage, like you can see for yourself, like all the scare zones back in 2019 were still really solid. Maybe one day the scare zones and HHN Hollywood will go back to their glory days and just go all out, try to fully immerse the guests like back in the day. But that day still has yet to come. Oh yeah, and I totally forgot about this too. In 2019 they had like roaming chainsaw people. Yeah, like you would mostly see them like in the lower lot just chilling, doing their thing with their chainsaws. They look like normal looking people, but the thing is they had like retro looking like Ben Cooper Halloween masks, which was a simple enough design for like a chainsaw character, but I dug it. I really dug it. Those chainsaw performers really gave guests the impression that like even if you're out of a scare zone, like there are no safe spaces. And I'm so glad that they're doing something like that again in 2025. To wrap this video up, I just have one last thing to say. Universal, or to any Universal execs that are watching this video, please bring back Throwback Thursdays. Basically what this was that every Thursday during HHN 2019, everything was 80s themed. Universal realized that a lot of their IPs were either from the 80s or took place in the 80s, so they took advantage of that. All the dubstep in the scare zones and even the rock music in the escalators were changed into a playlist consisting of greatest 80s hits. Guests were even allowed to dress up accordingly. The exclusive stuff they had included a tribute band performing classic 80s songs, a more PC version of Chucky's Insult Emporium around the entrance of the park, and Beetlejuice, who's usually walking around the park during the daytime, was present during the Horror Nights event, doing his thing, which is to me is just so awesome. And the overall retro theme made for some great merchandise as well. I think 2019 also holds the record for having the coolest looking merch for HHN. So you had cool merch, an awesome lineup, great houses except for Stranger Things, and a cool little thing they did every Thursday. 2019's Horror Nights was the pinnacle of fun, and ever since then, the event has yet to reach that level of awesomeness for me. But who knows? 2025 does sound promising. But yeah, 2019 is always gonna have a special place in my heart. And that's gonna be it for today's video. If you like what you saw, go ahead and click the like button. If you want to see more content like this, go ahead and click the subscribe button. Also, down in the description are the links to my other previous retrospective videos where I covered past HHN years, and also in the description are the links to all of my social media, so if you want to follow me in those, go ahead. If you stuck around to the very end of the video, thank you so much for watching, and until then, see you all in the fog.